A few years ago, a young man named John and his fiancée Emily went on their honeymoon to Paris. It was their long-awaited honeymoon that they had been dreaming of since the beginning of their relationship. They met at a party of mutual friends a year ago and fell in love with each other at first sight. Their romance progressed rapidly, and after 6 months, John proposed to Emily, giving her a ring with a diamond. They got married in the spring in Emily's hometown. And now it was time for their honeymoon in the most romantic city, Paris. John and Emily strolled along the streets of Paris, admiring the beauty of this romantic city. They held hands and were happy. But suddenly, Emily wanted to go into a fashionable clothing boutique to try on a couple of dresses. John smiled and agreed to wait for her outside. 20 minutes had already passed, but Emily was still not back. John began to worry, pacing back and forth in front of the boutique's window. He kept glancing at his watch, counting the minutes. After another 5 minutes, John decided to look in the shop window to see where Emily was. But because of the densely placed mannequins and elegant dresses, he could not see anything. Then John plucked up the courage and went inside. He carefully asked the young sales girl if she could hurry his wife in the fitting room. The girl looked at him in surprise and went to check the cabins. A minute later, she returned alone and told John that there was absolutely no one there. John burst into the store, his heart pounding with excitement. He checked all the fitting rooms one after the other, peeking through the cracks and calling out Emily's name. But she was nowhere to be found. John ran out into the street, feverishly looking around, hoping to see his beloved. But Emily had vanished into thin air. John tried to calm down and convince himself that she had simply decided to play a joke or had gone shopping somewhere else. He waited for her all evening in the hotel, looking out the window and listening for every rustle in the hallway. But Emily never showed up. By morning, John was desperate. What happened to Emily? John couldn't help but worry and feel anxious. At first light, he ran to the police station and filed a missing person report for his wife in a trembling voice. His heart ached with fear and uncertainty. All Parisian authorities were looking for Emily. It seemed like the whole of Paris had risen to search for the missing woman. But no one had seen her, as if she had dissolved into the air. The police did everything possible to find Emily. They checked hospitals and morgues, put up posters with her photo all over the city, combed the streets daily. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people trying to find any clues. But Emily seemed to have vanished into thin air. 3 excruciating weeks of fruitless searching had already passed. John came to the police station every day, begging them not to stop the investigation. But resources were limited, and the police were forced to close the case of Emily's disappearance. After 6 months, depressed and exhausted, John left Paris and returned home. Years went by, and John was never able to find his beloved wife. He was so devastated by grief that he could not work or live normally. John traveled a lot in hopes of finding Emily, but it was all in vain. 2 years later, John found himself at a fair in a small European town. He wandered past dusty tents and attractions when his attention was drawn to a sign with peeling letters that read, "House of Weirdness." The tent looked very old and dilapidated. Intrigued, John carefully opened the creaky door and went inside. Inside, it was dimly lit and smelled musty and stuffy. Iron cages lined the walls with shadows of creatures visible in the back. John heard moans, wheezes, and other pitiful sounds. Peering closer, he saw disfigured human freaks in the cages. Some were without arms or legs, others had no faces. Still others resembled semi-human monsters. It was a horrifying spectacle of human suffering and deformity. In the farthest cage, John noticed a hunched woman without limbs. Her face was crisscrossed with deep scars and crudely stitched up, with thick black threads that dug into her skin. It looked like her mouth had been forcibly sewn shut right through the lips. Not only her arms and legs were missing, but also her ears, bleeding wounds in their place. Her whole figure was covered in scabs, scurf, and unhealing sores. The woman sat hunched in a dirty puddle. Her hair was matted into clumps of dirt. A sign read, "Worm Woman." When she laboriously raised her deeply sunken sad eyes to John, he recognized a small mole on her cheek and froze in horror.